So, very warm welcome to everybody to the online electric car show brought to you by Transition Town Lewes. It's great to see so many people on a sunny evening. I thought you all might be down the pub now that they've reopened, but maybe the cold weather's got something to do with it. I'm Julia, and my co-host is Tim, who will wave. We're recording this event, so do please turn off your video if you don't want to be recorded. If you want to see different screen views, maybe with just the speaker or maybe everyone side by side, go to the top right of the Zoom screen and click View for options. Also, please can you all turn your sound off. We're going to first hear from Nigel Baker, who's from the Sussex Electric Vehicle Facebook group, who will introduce the topic of electric cars, and then we'll hear briefly from 11 local owners with their experiences. If you've got questions, please type them in the chat box. Click on the icon at the bottom of your screen. You can resize the box and move it around to where you want. If there's a specific question relating to what a speaker said, we'll try and answer it immediately, but it would be much easier to take all the questions and answer them together after the speakers have finished. Although this evening is about electric cars, I'd just like to make the point that we will have to reduce car usage dramatically, so there are fewer, smaller, and more energy efficient cars if we're going to avoid environmental catastrophe. Even with electric cars, there are environmental costs associated with the manufacture of the car body, the batteries, and pollution from oil and tyres. As lockdown has shown, the world is a far more pleasant place without the roads chock-a-block with vehicles. The solutions, of course, require some fundamental changes to our public transport system, and a change of attitude towards private car ownership, and probably a move towards car sharing. Having said that, we have to ditch fossil fuels quickly, and we can at least get ourselves off petrol and diesel engines and embrace electric. So let's hear about it. Nigel, over to you to introduce electric cars.
Okay, thank you. So, as I'm sure you all know, the government's committed to banning pure petrol and diesel cars from 2030 and hybrids from 2035. There's only really the battery electric vehicles are the way of having personal transport going forwards, and they're it's a big change for a number of people, but they are very good cars to drive, and they provide a lot of they're very very economical, and they actually have sort of zero emissions at the point of use, which is an important thing, so certainly for local pollution. So start by looking at what we mean by electric cars, and the very simplest definition is that it uses electricity and electric motors to drive the wheels. There are a number of different types. I'm sure you'd have heard about hybrids. Now, hybrids have a conventional engine and electric motor. They work together to power the car. So hybrids will be allowed until 2035 sold. So battery electric vehicles are the practical alternative going forwards, and they just have electric motors and batteries. You'll also have heard about probably hydrogen cars, and that's another option that people are considering, but they're probably slightly less efficient than battery cars. And self-charging hybrids is a well-known term in the marketing world, and that means it just uses the car slowing down to charge the battery, but you can't charge it at home using cheaper electricity, so they're not quite as efficient or cheap to run as battery cars. Can you move on to the next slide, please, Tim? So if you have a look at what's actually inside an pure electric car, they typically have this layout, and this is a Volkswagen ID3, and we'll have an owner talking about that later. But there's a large battery pack at the bottom of the car, and motors either at the front or the back, which drive the wheels. So there's far fewer moving parts than there are in a normal petrol or diesel car. It actually takes up less space in the car to make so you actually get more a nicer, roomier interior, and it also changes the way the car drives in a number of ways. With the weight lower down, it means the car doesn't roll so much, and also electric motors produce a lot of power or torque when they're stationary, so they accelerate very quickly. So it's a different driving experience, but one that I think most people enjoy. If we can move on to the next slide. The question here, is an electric car right for you? I mean, following on from Julia's question is whether you need a car at all, and that's one very good question. But if you do need a car, then I think just about without any major exceptions, you can make an electric car work for you. And I think everyone who will move to an electric car, they wouldn't possibly want to go back. I think it's a very, very pleasant and a very enjoyable experience moving to electric cars. But there are a few types that you can't get yet. So true off-roaders like the Land Rovers, nobody makes them yet. They're looking at it. There are no camper vans, no convertibles. There are a few types they're not making, but they are, as more electric cars come out, they are making those, and there will be those coming out soon. But also second-hand cars are expensive. They haven't been out as long as the petrol cars. So about the cheapest electric car second-hand you'll get is £4,000, and that's likely to stay the case for quite a long time. But if these aren't problems for you, I think electric cars can be very compelling. Move on to the last slide from this section. So a few questions, a few points about running costs and servicing. Electric cars are very, very efficient in terms of the energy usage. They're probably more than twice as efficient as hydrogen cars, and in terms of the energy themselves, significantly more efficient than petrol and diesel. But also a lot of electric car owners move on to EV friendly tariffs, so that the electricity is they charge the cars from home at night where they have off-street parking, and that's actually very cheap, and it comes out to probably a less than a quarter of the cost of running a petrol car. Also, servicing is quite often cheaper. There are fewer moving parts, there's fewer to fix, less to go wrong. The intervals are often longer. Car insurance is insurance, but there are some EV specifics. So some insurance companies provide cover for if you're to run out of petrol, or if there are problems with your charging equipment, that would be covered. And the last thing about servicing, the MOT is the same. All garages should do it, but there are some that aren't quite comfortable with electric cars at the moment, and the same with tyre places. Some don't like dealing with fully electric cars, and if you find a garage or a tyre place that doesn't want to do electric cars, they probably don't know what they're talking about, so they're probably best not to use them. So it's probably best if we actually have a look at speaking to some of the individual owners now, and if we move on to our next speaker.
Right. Well, can everyone hear me? Right.
Yeah, so our first speaker is Nick. Yeah?
Yeah. Right. So starting at the bottom, this is probably the cheapest way of getting into electric cars. It's a smart car. And it has limitations, but probably less than you would think. It is very much a two-person car, but it's not all that cramped. People look at it and think, gosh, it must be like something driving an old-fashioned Mini or something. But in fact, because the seats go all the way back, if you look at that drawing on the right there, the seats are right the way back to the back of it, which gives you plenty of leg room, and it's quite high, which gives you plenty of headroom. So it's quite spacious inside, and it surprised people when they first get in one. It does have limited luggage. If there are two people in there, the amount of luggage left for using is fairly small. It's enough for a week groceries, but for a long trip, it wouldn't be there. Can we go on to the next? Yeah. Right, 90 miles it says on the adverts, and I have once done exactly that. It only just did it, and I had to drive at 40 miles an hour all the way on very uncrowded roads with no lights, radios or anything. It just about did it. But quite frequently I can get 75 miles out of it. It's nearly always charged at home on the off-peak. At the time that I bought it, this was the last one of the old models, and there weren't any fast charging versions in the country. So it can only charge at about 4 kilowatts. So putting it on the mains lead at about 3¼ kilowatts is fine. And that's how it's charged almost every time. If you can charge it as fast as you possibly can, you can get it down to 2.5 hours with the rapid charger, but I haven't got one. The version that had a rapid charger did give you that time, but I'm limited to not much better than 7 hours. So it's charged overnight. It was £16,000, and that's after a grant. I've put the price there at 8,500 used. I've just looked up, and there are some around for 5,000 if you want it. So there it is, the very basic electric car. Very nice to drive, very high acceleration for such a tiny car, and it parks beautifully. It will park anywhere, including its party trick of parking facing into the road. At one point in Crawley, where parking is difficult, some fellow in a great big Mercedes came up and was just about to go into the last parking space when someone passed me in a smart car, parked in there, and the fellow in the Mercedes was raging away, and I then parked in the other half of the parking space. So there was 2 of them in the one he was trying to get in. But there they are.
Next up is Neil with his Hyundai Ioniq.
Well, hello everyone. I'm Neil Roberts. This is my car, which is a very different beast to the Smart that you just saw. This is a much more traditional body shape. It's not the current SUV type that you tend to see everywhere, and it's certainly as far from the Smart as you can go. I've had this car a short time now. This is my 3rd electric vehicle, and I've got to say I absolutely love it. One of the things that I most like about this car is the software has been so well.
And it's by how to press the Wi-Fi or cellular data thing, which I've never had before.
Could you possibly mute yourself, whoever that was? Sorry,
For a moment, I thought that was a question.
It's okay, I've done it.
Thanks. Okay.
So the thing I like most about this car is the software, which has just been very, very well thought out. It's a great car for motorway driving. It's very smooth. It's a very calming car, actually, because it's so quiet, it's so smooth, and it does almost all of the hard lifting for you. It's also one of the most efficient electric cars on the market at the moment. So even though it's got a relatively small battery, which is 38 kilowatt hours, it can actually has a claimed range of 193, which in summer I could definitely imagine easily being able to get. I think what we tend to see is more large cars coming onto the market, and what we arguably need is smaller, more efficient cars, and this car goes a long way towards that. So I brought it used. I paid about 24,000. It was 1 year old, and yeah, I don't regret my purchase at all. It is a fabulous piece of machinery.
Got a message saying, why have you gone through 3 EVs? What's wrong with them?
Well, very little actually. The first EV we had was a Leaf 24, which was a 2015 model. We still own that. My wife now drives that. The second EV we got was an MG ZS EV, and there is an owner who's going to be talking about that later on this evening. What was the reason I got rid of that? I wasn't entirely happy with some components of the MG. It wasn't entirely my cup of tea.
Okay, but it wasn't all right. It wasn't not a.
It wasn't a showstopper problem.
Well, we'll move on for now. We can always come back to any comments about that. Could we move on to Jan now with the Renault Zoe?
Oh, hello everyone. Yeah, our car, well, one of our cars is a Renault Zoe, and it's not the first one we've had. Our first electric car was a Nissan Leaf, which we purchased in January 2016. We subsequently got the Renault Zoe. It's a 6-month-old ex-demonstrator. We park it on our drive and we charge it once a week from our 7 kilowatt home charger. We use it mainly for short local journeys. We do have another electric car, which is a Tesla Model S, and we use that for long journeys and holidays. We've been a fully electric car household for 4 years now, since January 2017. Initially, we weren't looking to get an electric car, but at the end of 2015, we needed to replace a 15-year-old petrol car. And we just walked into a Nissan dealer with no idea what we wanted. And we saw a Nissan Leaf, and we were very impressed with it at the time. Currently, I use the Zoe 2 or 3 times a week for just occasional shopping and days out. As I previously mentioned, we charge it about once a week, as 180 miles is more than enough for our needs for a week. It's charged at home from our home charger, which is sited in our garage, but it could be charged from a domestic plug socket. The electricity we use is generated from our solar panels. Having said that, we did have the panels installed after we bought our electric cars. And then we used a cheap off-peak electric tariff at night for charging. Next screen, please. Oh, it's already there. It's there, sorry. We haven't had any problems finding chargers, as we mainly charge at home. We have been able to charge the car on the public chargers, but only because we were experimenting, and usually there was no problem with that. We use a local independent qualified mechanic for any servicing, which is minimal. People do tend to go on about the cost of an electric car, but there's no annual road tax, and the cost of the fuel, the electric fuel, is only 1/5 of the cost of petrol or diesel if you charge it at home. So if a normal trip was going to cost you £10 in petrol, it would only cost the same in electric. It would only cost £2. Also, at the moment, there's currently a government grant of £2,500 towards the cost of an electric car. The reason I like the car, it's nippy, it's easy and quiet to drive, and it's very easy to park because it's about the same size as a Toyota Yaris. There's no pollution or emissions as it's charged from our own solar electric, but you could charge on a green tariff if you were so minded. And we'd never go back to a fossil fuel car. And if you're interested, the reason that I replaced the Leaf was because the Zoe is a greater range. It's 180 miles instead of 120. And also it's smaller. And I do prefer to drive a small car.
That's great. Thank you very much, Jan. I completely agree with you. That sounds great. Small cars are wonderful. Right, so we're now going on to Mark with his Nissan Leaf. Hello, Mark.
Hello there. Good evening, everybody. I'm Mark Davis, and I drive a Nissan Leaf. I'm fairly new to the whole EV experience. I only bought the car in late November. It was a lockdown project, to be honest with you. So did a bit of research, but did a bit of research into it, but really, you know, whilst reading lots of things, you only learn when you get one, to be honest with you. I'm charging at home there on a home. I haven't got a home charger. I'm literally plugging into a 3-pin domestic plug. I've got an external plug socket on the house, and that is fitting into the charging port on the right there of the car, as you can see it, and I'm pointing to the blue lights that appear onto the dash. If there's no blue lights, you're not charging, basically, so it's fairly easy to see that. And next to that port that at the front that you can see that's plugged in, there is a 50 kilowatt charger, so I can charge on the motorways to rapid charge. Next slide, please, Tim. So my Leaf is the 24 kilowatt model. The Leafs have different size batteries. So that mine is the smallest one, which was affordable, which is what I could do. They also come in 30 kilowatts. And then with the newer models, they go up to 40 and also 64 kilowatts, which gives you a longer range. So the range that I get out of mine in the winter, it's less because the cold weather does affect batteries. So it's probably about 60 miles in the winter, which is fine. That's okay for me. And in the summer, I'm told, and we get some finer weather, it goes up to about 80. The charging there, as it says, rapid charges, about 20 minutes. On the 50 kilowatt charger that I mentioned at the beginning there. And we have got solar panels on our house, so I'm using that to help do the charging, which is obviously competing with other domestic appliances in the house, like washing machines and dishwashers and things like that. But overall, the whole experience of being new to EVs, I'm absolutely convinced there's no going back to me to a diesel car or a petrol car. And in fact, we did, when I bought the Nissan, we did have a Ford Focus diesel, and we sold that last weekend. So it's EV only for me now going forward.
Brilliant. Thanks, Mark. That's excellent. We're on to Russell now, please.
Hello, everyone. Yeah, I'm Russell. Yeah, I started my EV journey in 2018, almost exactly 3 years ago, when I bought a Tesla Model S, which we've still got. But my other half was so impressed with having an electric car that when it came time to replace her car, we went for this car here, the MG ZS EV. So we're now a 2 EV household. This is a great car. I mean, I really like it. It's I think it's a very accessible car. You know, about 20,000. You can probably go into the next slide now, Tim. It's probably about £20,000 for you know, a pre-registered, almost new version of this these days with the incentives and everything else. So for a brand new car, it's an SUV. It's you know, so it's 5-door. It's very roomy. So it's a very practical car as well. And I think, you know, we saw this at the EV festival a couple of years ago now. And as soon as we saw it, you know, we got a chance to look around, see that there was plenty of space for, you know, my 6-foot daughter in the back, and you know, loads of space for dogs and luggage and so on. So it is basically an electrified version of the petrol equivalent, the MG ZS. But in that respect, I think it's a very easy car to transition into as an electric vehicle, because it's very similar to what you would expect a car to be. and so it's very easy to drive. Everything's where you expect it to be, and so on. Because we do have two EVs, we tend to sort of charge this one on the 13 amp charger, just on a normal 13 amp plug. And again, similar to Mark, we've got solar panels at home, so plug it in the afternoon and charge it up for free, basically. So that's very good. Range wise, obviously it's not as good as the Tesla, but it's a very different price point as well. This car's got a 44.5 kilowatt battery. The claimed range, as it says here, is 163 miles. I tend to find that you can depend on getting 140 miles out of it pretty much all of the time. So that's a sort of realistic rate. And I think other features about the car, it's got a massive sliding panoramic glass roof, which you can't see from this photograph, unfortunately. So that gives the cabin a lot of airiness and ambience. It feels very roomy inside. It's nice that panoramic roof can slide as well. As I said, there's lots of passenger legroom in the back, big loading area. And I actually find it a very easy car to drive, especially around town. So, it does come with a lot of the gizmos that a lot of electric cars have, but at the same time, a very easy car to drive. And if it was your first EV, it would be, you wouldn't need to read the manual or watch YouTube to understand how everything worked. I think somebody was asking about not having charging at home on the driveway, and we use Octopus for our energy, and they have a scheme called the Electric Juice Card, which allows you to use a number of different charging networks, and one of those charging networks happens to do the lamppost chargers in a number of towns, including Brighton. So that's an option as well. And yes, it's more expensive than charging at home, but those facilities are there and expanding all of the time. So it's absolutely possible to charge these cars even if you don't have your own charging facilities.
Okay, thanks very much, Russell. We'll move swiftly on to Alice. Hello, Alice.
Hi everyone, I'm Alice, and I am probably the newest EV owner among everybody tonight. We've owned the car in December 2020. Literally, we picked it up on the last day of December 2020. It ended up being pretty much almost an impulse purchase EV buy. Top tip, try and do a bit more research, but we're very happy with what we're doing. So I was about to replace my very, very worn down Ford Fiesta, and I was going for a petrol hybrid. And then my husband said, if we're going to do it, we're going to do it right. So we went and looked around at a couple of different cars. And suddenly was brought to our attention to the VW, who had just released the ID3. Part of the reason why we were drawn to it is this Volkswagen's made a promise to do a closed loop system. So very nice that all the materials will be recycled and try and get they've got a battery recycling plant going, and that's one of the tips to go with them. What I found really difficult when buying an EV car is that a lot of car salesmen don't actually care that much about the environment. They're just trying to sell you a car, which is not my priority for changing to an EV car. So you need to do a bit more research on that side of things if that's one of the things that's important to you, which it was to me, because we buy secondhand cars and we use them till they're worn down and then scrap them. So the ID3 Business we bought is a 58 kilowatt hour battery. The range is about 100. We've put there 170, but that was probably because it was a bit colder. We were getting about 180 when now the weather's warmed up a bit. We haven't actually got a charger at home yet. Also, no impulse purchase EVs, because then now you're kind of stuck running around trying to find a place to charge your car. But it's working so far because of lockdown. We haven't been able to drive very far, but the short journeys that we've done, about 15-20 miles, have all been excellent. There's been no problems at all. It's you recognize the car being parked up at Tesco for an hour while I shop a bit longer than before. And yeah, it's been it's been really great. The one thing that we found was that it's got a few software issues. So it's a very new car. So there are lots of other things that could potentially go wrong with it, which is also the software issues. They're working on it and we are getting updates and it's rolling out slowly. But we do know that a few people who have rejected their cars because of the software issues, but that's because it's a new car. But we're happy with ours and we're sticking with it. So
thank you very much, Alice. That's very interesting. It's the first time I've seen one of those. Great. On to Warren with his Kia.
Evening, everyone. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Brilliant. So I'm Warren Phillips. I have a Kia e-Niro first edition. So it's the original one that came out in 2019. There are different models now. There's with different functionality, but this is the very first one. Been an EV owner since 2015. We're on our third EV. Just to quickly touch on it, the first one was written off. So we bought a Renault Zoe. There was an accident and it got written off. And so we bought the identical car. In fact, I think it's about 100 up on the VIN number. So probably made in exactly the same batch our first one was. We love the car so much. And then the reason for this car was we had two cars, and our second car was a very practical Honda Accord Estate. And that was our camping car, our travel to Europe car, put the bikes on the roof box, that kind of car. We needed something to replace it with. And at the time, there weren't very many options unless you went for something like a Model X, which was massively out of my price point. Basically, I needed a car I could put a dog in the back, and the options were the Jaguar I-Pace or this. And when I drove this, as much as I love the I-Pace, this car, the Jaguar wasn't £30,000 better than this car. This car is an amazing car. So it has a range, a WLTP range of 282 miles, and yeah, no problem at all. Last summer, I was seeing 320 in the summer, and in the winter, I drove to Ireland a couple of years ago in the winter, the first winter we had it, roof box. I've got a very large dog in the back of the car, child, Christmas presents, all the stuff for Christmas. And it was -3, and I got 230 miles out of a charge. So yeah, it's like witchcraft. This car's amazing. Charging time at home from empty is about 10 hours on a normal 7 kilowatt charger. Rapid charge, half an hour, 25%, 85%. About that, yeah, about 40 minutes would get you to about 80, 85 is where I like to be. The price new at the time was 32.5. They've just released a version which is very similar to this car for 32,500. My one and the one that they've just released doesn't have things like the fancy software and some of the top end safety features. Doesn't have the LED lights and stuff, but it's still just an amazing car. So I wouldn't hesitate to recommend anyone to get one of these. Price used, it's held its value incredibly well. 28.5. I've seen one for 27, but people who have them don't tend to get rid of them unless they're upgrading to a newer version. Like other people here, I have solar panels. I also have a Zappi charger, which means excess energy from my house that isn't going into the house or into my battery goes into the car or either of the cars. Saying that, there was a point where for about 8 weeks, we didn't have a charger at home. We had a problem with our electrics. And so I had to turn off the circuit for the garage and for the chargers. And so we spent 8 weeks charging at public charge points. It is definitely doable. And we have two cars, so we have to do it for both the cars. It's just a matter of working out how you do it and making it work with your life. In our case, we found a car park near our office, and once a week or once every 2 weeks, in the case of this one, we would just charge there and park in that car park, pay to park in that car, put the car on charge, and I think it was £1 per charge. So it was actually cheaper to charge than it was to charge at home. And we would just top the car up from wherever it was to full, that day, and then come back from our day at the office, get in the car and go home with a full car.
Okay. Can we move on, Warren? I mean, it's great hearing about charging not on at home, but we can come on to that. Let's see what Nicoletta's going to tell us about her Tesla. Hi everyone.
So I'm an EV owner since the end of 2019. although I ordered the car quite a few months before, and I was impatiently waiting for it. And just as it came, I had to get used to the winter driving with an electric car, which is a bit faster than usual. It was a very interesting experience. And then lockdown came. We were supposed to have a charger installed very soon after I picked up the car, but for some reason it got delayed, and then lockdown came, and it only happened about a year after I got the car. So I have 1 year of experience without the charger at home. So instead of using a faster charger, I was using the granny cable, and in the picture there is my really long cable snaking into the garage, into the 3-pin plug. And that's how it was charged for almost a year. And we really didn't have any problems. Occasionally on longer trips to, for example, to London, about 100 miles, I would stop somewhere along the way at the supercharger, and that's the Tesla magic of the superchargers. You just plug in, have a coffee, and then off you go, and it's all charged in less than half an hour. Yeah, I'm really happy with the car. I was a Tesla fan since the very first Roadsters came out, so I was impatiently waiting for something to fall down to the price range of where I could afford one. The one that I have is a Standard Range Plus, which is the entry level at the moment. There's still, in a couple of years, there will be another even cheaper one. This one now, it's about 42,000 from new, and there's no more EV grant. When I got it, I had a £3,000 discount with an electric vehicle grant. Unfortunately, this doesn't work for cars over 40,000, I think. Now it does work for slightly cheaper, for cheaper models. The charging time at home, here it says from empty 8 hours. I've never actually charged from empty. What I do, we have Octopus Go, which has a very nice night tariff. So every couple of days, I just plug the car in for about 4 hours. The 4 hours where the tariff is around 5p per kilowatt. So with around £1.50, I go from 20 to 80%, which is quite nice, as opposed to charging the car with charging a petrol car.
Can we can we move on shortly? How are you? If you've got anything else, because we're running short of time.
No problem.
Yeah, long journeys. Maybe you can talk about them afterwards. Somebody can ask you about what long journeys you've done. We're just going to move on now to Nick with his Jaguar I-Pace.
Hello. Yeah, I got my Jaguar I-Pace in January 19. It replaced a Nissan Leaf, but I wanted the longer range EV to use instead of my wife's Mitsubishi plug-in hybrid, which she loves and still got. I chose the I-Pace because, like the Leaf, it was designed and built as an EV. There's no fossil fueled versions. And the handling is excellent. In fact, I can honestly say it's the best car we've had. It's got 4-wheel drive, and with the low center of gravity, it can drive like a Jag. The mileage, the range does depend on how you drive it, but if you drive it fast on the motorway, then you're down to about 200 miles, but normal driving, it goes up to about 240. It's got a lot of features, the panoramic roof, very comfy seating. I like the head-up display, which means I can keep my eyes on the road with your speed and the limit shown, and also the sat-nav information. Other safety features I like are the matrix headlights, which mean you can stay on main beam, and then it just cuts out sections of the main beam so as not to dazzle. the oncoming traffic, and it's like witchcraft, to be honest. The adaptive cruise control with steering assist keeps you in the lane and is very relaxing, especially on the motorways. I charge at home on off-peak. I've got economy 7 tariff, and it works out at 2p a mile. I tend to plug it in whenever the battery gets to about 50%, because I know the 7 hours of off-peak will take me up to 100%. Before lockdown, I did trips to Cornwall, where we encountered snow at Bodmin, and the 4-wheel drive handled magnificently. It definitely is an off-roader when it comes to snow and ice. And with the air suspension, you can lift it up to give you more ground clearance. The longest trip I've done is to the Southern Ireland, going over via Holyhead, Dublin. Had no trouble with the charging network over there. They're all run by the same company, which is handy. Also on the ferry, I got a phone call from the tracker system. The control center asked me if I was in the car because the car was locked and moving, but they knew exactly where I was on the ferry. And that was reassuring to know that the tracker system works.
Right. Can we, are you nearly done? Sorry, Nick.
No, I'll leave it at that.
Yeah. Okay, all right, Paul, can we move on to you?
Yeah, I'll be brief.
You've got a second-hand car, haven't you?
Yeah, so I'm Paul. We bought our BMW about 2.5 years ago. It was 2 years old when we bought it, and we were replacing a 19-year-old car. We just felt we just had to replace it. It's on its last knees. So we found a second-hand one up in Bury, just north of Manchester, about 300 miles away. So we jumped on the train, went up there on the train and bought it, and then drove it home. So right in at the deep end, never having driven an electric car before. And that was great, actually. It was fine. And we had to stop twice because this has a range about 120, 125 miles if you drive very carefully. So we stopped twice and that was all fine, actually. So we went right in at the deep end, but no problems. And I have to say, it is fantastic. I'm feeling quite competitive with all the other owners who are all picking up their car because I love my BMW. I think it's fantastic. So I would highly recommend it because it's a nice small car and it's just great to drive. My wife and I both drive it, and we're not keen drivers, we weren't, but we love driving this. It's just so calm. It's a bit like a sort of glorified golf cart. So it's BMW wouldn't like to hear that, but it's just great. And I suppose the only downside is that occasionally it will encourage me to get in my car or on my bicycle because I enjoy being in it so much. So anyway, and just
you don't have a second car, do you, Paul?
No, we don't have a second car. My wife and I just both use this, and we charge it once a week, I suppose, on average, at home, just in a 3-pin plug in the garage. We've never bothered getting a charger, buying a charger. We just don't think no point really. So 3-pin point overnight. We have solar panels, so when it's sunny, we'll plug it in during the day, use it as storage. But honestly, it's as good as gold and could never turn back to a petrol car now. Both my wife and I are just so surprised how we just fell in love with electric cars, or particularly this car. So
thanks,
big
Paul.
thumbs up.
Okay. I'm going to move on quickly to Nigel because we're going to run out of time otherwise.
Okay, I'll be very quick. I wanted to get an electric car, and when the Tesla announced their Model 3 a few years ago, I signed up on day one to reserve one. They took some time to build them, certainly in the right-hand drive format. And the local Tesla garage called me up and said, "Oh, you've been waiting a long time. Do you want to borrow one of our other cars for the day?" So I thought, fancy, free Tesla for the day, I'll borrow that. And then I bought one almost straight away because I enjoyed the experience so much. If you move on to the second slide, Tim, so it's the the Model S. It's the kind of slightly larger than a Tesla Model 3. Range is about 230 miles, and I find that if I'm driving, if I want to go, slightly further, if I was ever concerned about the range, or I didn't want to have to charge, I could drive more gently and get more miles out of it. Or if I drive more enthusiastically, the range will be less, but then that's much the same as a normal petrol car. Charging it at home from empty, I've got a kind of a normal EV charger on the house, and that'll take 12 hours from empty, but like the other people, it never gets empty. You kind of charge it up as and when. The cars, a Tesla now would be something like Model S would be about £84,000. I couldn't afford that, so I got a second-hand one, and they're down now probably about as low as £20,000. So yeah, it's like the others say, long journeys aren't a problem. I need to stop more than the car does, so that's really not a problem. The only other interesting thing that the others haven't mentioned, my house really isn't suitable for solar, even though I want it. So I've joined up with a company to crowdfund a wind turbine, so that the green energy to charge the car and power my house will be, I actually physically will own a share of an individual wind turbine that will provide all the electricity for my house.
Good for you. Well done. Thanks, Nigel. Great. Right, so one or two things we've been talking about, chargers here. Somebody said that you can get a £350 grant on your first charger. Yeah, that's what I mean, don't I? And I did note that sometimes you have to have your fuse box changed if you've got an old fuse box, but I think a lot of people have got solar panels, and so you will have had a new fuse box put in there. Somebody was right at the beginning, was talking about, the cost of living in a terraced house and the cost of charging on, having to charge on street or at chargers rather than home charging. It's anybody want to comment on that?
Well, there are a number of different ways around that. I mean, there are some, a lot of public chargers you could use. Also, I'm sorry, I get some feedback here. Well, I think one of the other things you could do is charge at the workplace. I think more companies are putting in chargers in the car parks at their workplace. And also, places like Tesco currently have free chargers if you're parking to shop, so you can charge for up to 3 hours for free there at the moment, which is something I certainly do on longer holiday trips when I'm not near a charger, but I know I'm going to be in town. So there are a number of different options there. It's getting better, and the availability is better. But there are people, so in the Sussex CVs group I'm a member of, there are people that don't have off-street parking, and they manage perfectly fine with the options.
Right, I think this is probably the question we've just had is probably the one that everybody is concerned about. What's the risk of not finding an available charging station on a long journey? Now, somebody else can comment, but my impression, I don't actually have an electric car myself, but the impression I get is that you have to plan. That's the only thing with having an electric car. You do have to plan long journeys. Is that really a summary?
I'm happy to answer this. So it depends. Yes, some planning is definitely needed. But what I would say is that as the cars get better, it becomes less of an issue. So in our first car, in our Zoe, we planned everything to the nth degree. We made sure we knew everything. In our current car, we're just not fussed. We have pretty much 300 miles range in the summer. So if we're tooting around Cornwall, we've normally got over 100 miles left in the car at any point. And if we stumble across a charger, we will charge. And if we don't, when we get down to a point where we have to charge, we'll look on ZapMap, we'll look on various apps, and we'll find somewhere to charge. And normally there's somewhere to charge within 50 miles. If you just look at it that way, you're going to have no problem at all.
Sure, but not everybody's got super swanky cars.
Yeah, so
you're more, you know,
I think it depends on where you
I'd
go.
get a second-hand car and it would only do maybe 100, just over 100.
Yeah.
So it depends on where you are. So if you're in deepest, darkest Wales, if you're in Cornwall, if you're in some of these places, then yes, you need to be aware and need to be aware where the charges are all the time. But if you're traveling into some main cities or even places like Brighton, anywhere that's reasonably connected, you don't tend to have, once you get used to it, you tend to get to the point where you relax a lot more about it. And like I said, there are apps like ZapMap, WhatsApp, Plug Share. There's lots of apps out there which can help you find charging points. Once you are comfortable in the car, it becomes just part of having an electric car.
Julia, if I could quickly come in here, it's Paul
Sure.
here.
Sure.
Yeah, because my range is a lot lower. As I say, it's about 120, 125. You definitely have, well, I definitely have to plan. If I'm doing a longer trip, I have to plan. But, you know, after a few long trips, you do get a lot more relaxed about it all. But you do need to plan. There's no two ways about it. But I've never had a problem, but I just need to plan. I'm not very good at planning. But
Has any EV owner on this evening ever had a problem and run out of juice?
Never.
No.
Well,
I mean, it has happened. You know, we hear stories, but I think that's generally because people haven't planned. So I think you do have to kind of adjust your state of mind, and say, well, I have an electric car. I need to have a plan and a contingency plan. But I think, as already been said, two things are happening now. There are more electric charging points than ever before, and they're becoming more all of the time. And two, the newer versions of cars tend to have the kind of ZapMap type capability built into the car now. So within your sat nav, you can plan your charging stops in the car. So it's getting a lot easier as time goes on.
Can
I once nearly got caught. I was driving home and I'd calculated the miles and I thought I'd get it. But I was coming along the A23 and it was jammed because there was an accident and I had to go backwards. And by the time I got home, I drove up the drive and the hooter, the warning went on just as I got in my drive. So I was within
lucky
a yard or so of running out of battery, but I did get home.
Thanks, Nick. Was it?
Sorry, it's Alice. I just want to say one quick thing. I understand how apprehensive people are, and it does take a lot of planning, and it is quite scary. As someone who just jumped in and didn't do sort of as much research as some of these guys have done for their cars, it is quite scary having to plan where you're going to stop and what you're going to do and when you're going to do a long drive. So I understand completely where that's coming from. It does take time to get comfortable.
Great. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, if I can add just a couple of points to that. A couple of years ago, we drove our Leaf 24, which is one of the lowest range electric cars on the road at the moment. And we drove it from Sussex up to West Yorkshire. And it took 4 stops. Each stop took about 20 minutes. But it was absolutely a piece of cake because we had these apps on our phone where we could look, what's the next charger 60 miles on my journey? Is it available? Is it working? And then we would go there and we could see on the app that there were other chargers within 5 to 10 miles of that. So if that one was broken, we'd go to another. So it is perfectly possible to do this, even in a low range EV.
Yeah, I guess we're so used to not having to think about our driving, really. That's we've got into a sort of rather lazy state, haven't we?
You know what? It makes journeys a lot more fun. It makes road trips actually an adventure.
Yes, I've heard that from a number of people saying that, but you know, we've stopped at places we would never have thought about stopping on our journey. In fact, the journey, the trip has become part of the holiday. Because you've actually stopped. You thought, well, okay, well, we'll stop at York on the way, and maybe we'll go and see so and so. And it's actually quite an interesting concept, isn't it? That you, instead of it just being, I've got to get from A to B, that you make it part of the.
I think this is part of human nature. We see the journey and we see it as a chore, and we want to get from A to B as quickly as we possibly can. if we see the journey differently, we look at it differently, and just say, I'm gonna see the scenery. I'm gonna enjoy this experience. I'm gonna stop every 2 hours, say, stretch my legs for 20 minutes, 30 minutes, and it makes the whole journey so much more enjoyable and more relaxing. And you don't end
should
up at your
stop every 100 miles or so anyway. You know,
well,
just,
I completely agree.
yeah, biology, rest breaks. You know, it's just recommended. The idea that people will sit in a car for 300 miles at a time is just bonkers.
My bladder range is 120 miles.
Yeah, before we got our long range EV, we had a Honda Accord, as I said before, and we were doing European trips. We went to Ireland a couple of times, and the last 2 trips we just timed ourselves at each stop. And by the time you stopped, put petrol in the car or whatever, you know, had a wee break, the kid wants something, the dog needs a walk, you know, 30, 40 minutes goes really fast. You know, I'm trying to drag my wife out of the shops takes 10 minutes. So yeah, like we just found that actually we could do it in an EV, and we do it in an EV. In fact, now we go and we actually stop. We don't bother charging the car because we don't need to charge the car, but we still do all the other things that we have to do, like go to the toilet, walk the dog, feed the dog. All those things you have to do have to be done. The car is just part of that trip now.
In Norway, where most cars sold now are electric cars, petrol stations are starting to close down. It won't be long there before it's the petrol people that are going to have to plan where the nearest filling station is.
Yeah. We've had a question, somebody talking about if you don't have off-street car parking. That's, I mean, I think another massive issue with electric cars. And somebody asking, is it practical to lay a cable with a protector across the pavement between your car and the house? I don't think you're allowed to, are you?
Oh, it's a grey area in law. So what I would say is you need to talk to your local council about it. So there are some solutions. Some councils are doing lamppost charges and various things. There's people like Connected Curb who are putting small little like things in the curb that you can charge from. There's a place in Oxford where they're putting in gullies, like the old Victorian rain gullies, the sort of iron cast ones. They're using those to channel cables through. You basically pop your cable through it, and then you can charge your car parked near the house. There will be options for this. So I work with, I set up something called EVA England, or was one of the people setting up EVA England during lockdown as part of my lockdown project. And we're working with the government on this and various other bits and pieces to try and find solutions and try and make it easier for people to be able to charge.
It's not around yet, but when self-driving finally gets there, it will be possible to send your car to the charging point with you and order it to come back again afterwards.
Yeah. Well, when we get to self-charging cars, we won't need to own the cars then.
Park outside. Sorry about the interruption.
Yeah, if we get to the point of self-charging cars, we won't need to own the cars. The cars will just be in, you know, available, and we'll summon a car on an app, and it'll turn up at our house, and we'll use the car as we need it.
Yeah.
Yeah, having a self-charging, a self-driving car, I think you'll get past the point of ownership at that point.
Well, this is, I suppose, you know, like I raised as an issue at the beginning. I mean, you know, coming from my sort of environmental background, obviously, that's the direction I think we need to go. You know, I mean, it is very hard though. I mean, I have a car, very small one, but you know, it is difficult to ditch the car. It is very difficult. What I'm going to do now is finish officially. And then we can stay on if anybody wants for another 10 minutes, quarter of an hour or so, if anybody else wants to ask any more questions. But you can leave in a minute, but I've got a couple of bits of information for you before you go. If you want to see a recording of this event, it will be on the Transition Town Lewes website within a few days. We also have the electric bike show next week, same time next week. Tickets on Eventbrite. And we have lots of information about electric cars on the website from our previous electric car events. Tim will put the hopefully the link up on the in the chat box. And also, if you've got any more questions, please send email us at inquiries@transitiontown.lewes, and we'll try and pass your message on to somebody who can help, or alternatively you can go to Facebook, the Sussex EV's Facebook page, and these guys are really helpful at answering any questions you may have about electric vehicles, EVs. This event is free, but if you've enjoyed it and would like to give us a small donation towards funding more events like this, we would really appreciate it. The link is now going up, I hope, in the chat box. It's just transitiontownlewes.org/donate. It's on our website. So thank you very much for everybody who's presented, and all of you who've come to listen to us. And hopefully we'll have a real live event, maybe if not this year, next year, when you can actually feel the cars beneath your hands and feet. But anyway, we'll stay on now. So if anybody wants to stay on, and we can have a little chat.
Question.
Yeah.
Batteries. All batteries have some sort of lifespan depending on how you charge them and their cycles. Are we yet reaching a point where the batteries have to be replaced, or they become so unusable you spend all your time charging and they got to be replaced?
I don't think that's actually much of a problem. I think some of the earlier cars, when they came out, the battery management wasn't so good, but certainly for the ones that produced recently, it seems that the batteries will probably outlive the cars. Now, they do decrease in range slowly, but it's much the same as if you had rechargeable batteries for your, like your camera or whatever. But it doesn't last maybe quite as long, but it's perfectly sufficient. So it's not a problem. And when it comes to recycling them, I think there are, if the car gets scrapped, then the batteries have quite a good second life opportunity to be used in projects or energy storage or a number of things, or even just fully recycled. The chemical components of the batteries are quite easily separatable to be used in making new batteries.
Well, being naturally tight, I never buy anything new. So I'll be looking at perhaps a 10-year-old EV car, and I don't want to buy something like that if I've got to spend a small fortune on replacement batteries.
Well, with the older cars, you can actually look at them and find out how healthy the batteries are. Certainly if you speak to like one of the owners groups or the Sussex EVs group, we can point you in the right direction with that. I think there's software you can use to look at the cars, which will tell you how well they've been used, how well they've been managed. Again, it's like if you were to buy let's say a petrol Golf, the previous owner might have thrashed it, or they might have driven it very carefully, and that'll actually make a difference to the life of the car. And that's essentially the same with an EV. But with an EV, it's probably actually slightly easier just to see what's happened to the car because of the way the electronics shows you the information.
I've probably had the car longest of anyone that's presented here, I think. Just coming up to 7 years, and there's no loss in my battery charge in that time.
Yeah,
so
brilliant.
They do last a long time.
I know some early cars had problems, and so the early Leafs and things like that, and that's why the manufacturers kind of leased batteries for a while. But we're seeing a lot of moving away from that now, and I think, as Nigel said, battery management software and battery management systems with thermal cooling and thermal management extend the life of the battery quite considerably. But I think an interesting thing that we're starting to see happen is an industry and people who want to maintain electric vehicles. So obviously for the last few years, the EVs have been quite new, and it's just been, people buy them brand new, and it's been down to the manufacturers. But now there's a whole, as you'd expect with it, the motor industry in general, people are just interested in how things work and keeping things going for as long as possible. So we're now seeing, battery reconditioning, battery swap outs, battery upgrades, all kinds of services coming along, recognizing that, we've now had EVs for over 10 years. So people want to keep these things going and give them second lives. And I think, the price of all this will start to fall as demand goes up.
You,
So worth
you
pointing out
mentioned
actually.
early Leafs. The very first Leafs used metal hydride rather than
yeah, that's true.
batteries, and they don't last very long.
Sorry, Neil, were you going to say?
Yeah, I was just going to say that it's worth pointing out that a lot of these companies, well, I think pretty much all of these companies that are doing battery swap outs of these early cars like Leafs are then using the batteries as storage within their premise, or selling them on to other people to use as home storage. So it's not that the battery is unusable.
No.
It's not just going to go into landfill. That battery pack has probably got about 40 years of total life, not in the car, but in other applications after it's finished its life in a car.
Because even Nissan are doing their home storage system using second life Leaf batteries. All right.
Yeah.
Yes, Nissan.
There are
There's
several
a few companies
in the
doing
UK
it
that actually have got huge banks of car batteries to power their. I think there's some university or something like that uses banks and banks of ex-car batteries, because it's just because the demands are different, aren't they, on the battery?
That's right. That's right.
So they can be used for something like that, where the demands aren't quite so immediate.
That's exactly it. Yeah.
There was a question in the chat about charging abroad, and particularly in France. I planned to do that last year, but lockdown put a kibosh on that. The people who've charged abroad, I think, Warren, you said you'd been to France?
I've been to France, I've been across to Ireland, and I've charged there. Yeah, you just basically do a little bit of research and get the local cards, and it isn't that difficult to work out what they are. You're not at this point. We're not going to be the first people doing it, so the cards are pretty straightforward to come by, and some of the cards that are out in the UK now will work abroad. I think the Juice card works abroad. If you have Ionity account, it will work anywhere in Europe. So all you have to do is just basically have a little look. With Ireland, it's ESB, and finding out and going onto their system. And with them, you just registered. And I didn't have an Irish address. I just rang them up and spoke to them, and they sent me a card to my house in the UK, and then I charged for free. It was awesome because they have free charging. They've just changed now to a page to an actual paid subscription. But until this year, it was free. So for 2 years, I was touring around Ireland just charging my car for nothing.
Can I just talk about the uses of electric? I mean, it seems to me the most useful thing for an electric car is if you've got a regular commute. And, that sort of journey is when it's really, really useful. Is it not? Would anybody agree with that?
Well, I would just come in here and say that we use our car just for short journeys. I mean, we only do short journeys, really. We don't really go very far in the car. It's always trains until a year ago. So like a week's worth of driving would just be one charge, really. So we don't commute to work, but it's just driving around, so it's whether to shop or see a friend or whatever. So just pottering about.
I think it depends on what car you've got. If you're doing 200 miles a day, then you're probably looking at a pretty hardcore car to do that. You wouldn't be looking at the cheapest car you get. You need something super reliable. Something like my car, it's a Hyundai. It's not even as nice as a Tesla's. But 200 miles a day, I wouldn't blink at doing that every day, summer or winter in my car. And in something like a Tesla, it wouldn't be an issue because you have a supercharger network to fall back on. But no, who does 200 miles a day? 1,000 miles a week? That's obscene amounts of mileage.
I do. I mean, I haven't really gone very far in the last year because, like everybody else, we've been locked down. But before that, for work, I certainly drove the Tesla a lot for work, and drove in and out of London. Drove to Sunbury a lot, and had the advantage that the customer I was driving to had charging in their car park. So, and if I drove into London, if you register £10 a year, you get free congestion charge. You're exempt from the ULEZ charge. It was costing me £13 a day to park at Barbican car park, and I got free charging while I was there. So
if you park in Westminster, I think it's 20p for 3 hours.
Yeah, you pay for 10 minutes parking and you get the maximum time allowed in that parking bay, which could be 3 or 4 hours. Yeah. So I think I think there are cars for every type of person almost. We're still waiting, as we said at the beginning. There's still a few types of cars, not many convertibles or off-roads, but they're coming. And I think electric cars can be used for almost any kind of journey. It's as Warren says, just get the right car for your lifestyle. But there are plenty of choices out there.
Yeah, I wonder if the prices are going to come down. I think that is another problem for a lot of people.
Yeah, I agree. I think, I think the highest barrier to entry at the moment is that the cars with the longer range are effectively brand new cars with a higher price point to get into. I think, that MG that we've got as our second car was great because, £20,000 give or take for a brand new car, or £200 a month. You've still got to be in the market for a reasonably new car to fork that kind of money out. But it's, as far as electric cars go, that's quite a good entry point, rather than spending 50, 60 or more.
And I think with the used cars at the entry level, there's really not a lot, probably less than £4,000. This is down to a number of reasons. There's a supply and demand issue. I think a lot of people are getting interested in electric cars, and the early ones there weren't that many out there, and also they still run fine and they go well, so they're still fairly decent and good cars to use. But also the components of the car have a value. Like we're talking about the second life of the batteries. Even you were to take like a 2010 Nissan Leaf and take it to pieces, it would still there'd be more value in the bits than there would be in a 10-year-old Fiat Punto, for example. So it's you're probably never going to get down to that £500 just got through its MOT level electric car, because the components in it are worth more than that. And I'd like to see the government, local authorities help with maybe some second-hand leasing plans for people that I don't want to see people disenfranchised because they can't buy a car when they could have bought a petrol car. Now, of course, it will cost them money to run the petrol, but they can't physically buy the car. So maybe an option to help with leasing those second-hand cars would be a good way to go.
I think conversions we'll see.
Leasing is a good point to make, because leasing our first car, we were paying £150 a month in petrol, and our first car, Renault Zoe, was £118 a month to lease and £3 a week to run. So we actually saved money by scrapping the car and getting the Renault Zoe and leasing it, and that's the thing to look at. So there are people who I know who've jumped into electric cars because they were paying hundreds of pounds a month on petrol and diesel, and they just factored that into their lease costs that they were paying on their lease cars, and actually are saving money driving a much nicer car, much nicer experience. And that's another thing. These cars are lovely. Electric cars are just lovely cars. They're smooth, they're lovely to drive, they're quiet, they're all the things you want in a car. And they can work out cheaper if you manage it correctly.
We've just had a very good point, and I don't know why we haven't touched on it. We meant to touch on it, was hybrid. I'm not a great fan of going down the hybrid route, because I sort of feel it's it's sort of an in-between stage, and there's just going to be another load of cars ditched before we get to the the final solution of the electric car. But anyway, so has anybody got a hybrid?
My wife runs a Mitsubishi plug-in hybrid, and it was the first electric car I bought in 15. She has a 30-mile range, and it gets plugged in every time. Often that 30 miles is enough for her to go running about local, but putting petrol in every sort of 3 months maybe, it works out to almost 100 miles to the gallon. So it is a very cheap car to run. And I think she'll keep it until we find something like it, because she likes sitting up high, something like that, that is pure electric.
So John wanted to say something.
I don't know if you can hear me okay.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, I've got a Mitsubishi Outlander plug-in hybrid. Had it on a lease. It's due to go back after 3 years imminently. But it's suited me absolutely perfectly with a short 2 or 3 mile commute to the station to then commute into London. It was a charge up once a week. Plus the benefit of if I had to drive to London, once you get within in the Lewes area, you can convert and drive the rest of the journey on electric. So it has actually worked out quite well. But now in a changed lifestyle and less commuting and a different day-to-day sort of duty cycle, looking to move to a full battery electric now. Just another question, but as I've got the floor for a second, you're talking about state of batteries, and I've been following quite closely. Every manufacturer has got a user group for their vehicles, and certainly the Mitsubishi group is very active, and there's almost group actions going on around the battery degradation, and around the world, people sort of disputing with Mitsubishi for seeking replacement batteries as the state of health of their batteries dips below 80% within a very small number of years. And certainly there's been a specific application, a mobile phone app to track this through a OBD2 connector. And I can see thousands of Mitsubishis around the world and the state of their batteries and see the downward trend. That's just the nature of battery chemistry, of course.
Somebody's just asked.
I have a power consumption question.
Okay, you do your question, then I've got another question that's come up in the chat box. You
Okay.
do yours first.
I have a Tesla Model 3 and very recently discovered that I can precondition the battery, warm it up basically in cold weather. And it's changed the consumption from something approaching 400 watt hours per mile down to in the region of 250. I didn't even know that, it would make a significant difference. I wondered if any of the other Tesla owners are aware of that and make use of it.
Yeah, it's one of the. Sorry, I was just going to say, it's one of the advantages of the Tesla was that they had this battery management system in place with all their cars when other manufacturers didn't have that, and so batteries are really quite severely affected by thermal conditions, and we've had a lot of cold weather. So yeah, the ability to kind of precondition the car before you set off dramatically improves efficiency and performance, because otherwise if you don't precondition it, the car senses that the battery is cold and it limits the power output from the battery. And if you're driving in cold weather as well, you've got things like the heaters on full, and you maybe using the seat warmer. So actually your power consumption is higher as well. And that just leads to overall poorer efficiency. So I think a lot of the other manufacturers are catching up on this. They're refining their battery management systems, and we're seeing a lot of the new cars coming to market having similar capabilities, but it has been a challenge for some cars in the past.
So maybe we'll all end up with little, I don't know, little places you put your battery at night to keep it warm.
With the iPace, you just program it to preheat the battery and warm the cabin at whatever time you want to leave in the morning. And this will be done while you're plugged in on your off-peak charging. So it really improves the range, and you get into a warm car with a warm battery.
Yeah, sure.
Defrosted as well when it's snowing.
Oh yes, you don't have to scratch your windscreen, so your windscreens stay nice and clean. You don't have all those micro scratches from cleaning off the ice.
Can I make a quick comment about hybrids?
Sure.
If it doesn't have a plug, it's not electric. Very simple. No matter what the advert says, if it doesn't have a plug, it's not electric.
Yes, yeah, so there's self-charging hybrids that try to do it. It's a lot of bollocks, isn't it?
Ian has a question.
Yeah, is there any government policy, or can I turn around to my local council and say, I'm thinking of buying an electric car, can you put me an on-post charger in?
Government policy, so I will field this one. We're working on it. We're trying to get the government to agree. So EVA England are in meetings right now with various departments in the government, trying to get various bits and pieces done. And please come and support us. We could do with some more members. We could do with some more support. As for what will happen, I don't know. At the moment, there's a heady mix of local government and central government trying to do various things with no real steer. Pushing your local authority is always a good thing. Just push at them and ask them, and the more people that ask, the more chance we have of getting something done. Some councils are better than others. Brighton has started putting in lamppost chargers in some stupid places, but they're putting them in. So yeah, it just depends on your local authority. But for central government, there's no real steer at the moment. We're still trying to get that level of policy created. But there's a jar between how much central government pushes it and how much local government controls it. So for any of these things, your local council are the people to go to your local council, push at local council. If you want help doing that, talk to Sussex EVs, EVA England. We will help where we can by getting the rest of the people in our areas to write in to add extra pressure, to apply some voice to your voice, add our voices, and we will try and make a change.
Everybody knows in Lewes, though, that we now have a Green Council here, and they are desperately trying to do something about it. But there's just one problem after another of trying to get these things, put in.
We've got a population of, I think, 80,000 in Hastings. Supermarkets have got 2. I think public car parks have got 2 chargers.
Not a lot.
It's going to change. I mean, there was a company that's setting up large electric forecourts. They opened their first one in Essex, probably tail end of last year, and that had about 30 rapid charging points. And they've recently got approval to build one in Knockfield, and they plan to put 100 of these across the country where there are 30 charging points. So it's like effectively almost like a small service station with a cafe, toilets and meeting rooms, all that kind of fancy stuff, and as many charging points as you could ever possibly want. And
we've had a question from somebody saying, has anyone had to queue for a charging point? So that's quite relevant at the moment.
Yeah, if you're on a charger like that, I think one of the ladies said she plugs in overnight but only needs 4 hours charging. Does the car then send you a message or something, say you're charged, come and take your car away so somebody else can get on it?
It depends. It normally will do. I mean, a lot of the cars come with an app so that the notification will be there. So, if I stop at a motorway service station, it will tell me my car's nearly charged. I think a lot of the rapid chargers, they actually have a thing where if you leave the car plugged in after it's fully charged, then you'll get like a penalised charge for overstaying your usage. So you kind of need to know. It's a bit like if you park in town and you put 2 hours on the meter or an hour on the meter, you've got to know in your head when you need to go back and take it off to avoid getting charged. It's a similar kind of thing.
Yeah, run out in your night clothes to unplug it.
There are also different. There are also different types of chargers.
I think Nicoletta's trying to say something. Are you?
I know. I was wondering if the question was about the nighttime charging.
Sorry.
I don't know.
So there are different types of chargers. There are what we call destination chargers, and what we call rapid chargers. Rapid chargers tend to be very quick. You'll charge within an hour, and you have things like destination chargers, which tend to be smaller, cheaper, not as quick chargers, where you're supposed to plug your car in and leave it for a long time. So when I was charging, I didn't have a charger at home. There was some near the office. I plug in when I arrived at the office, go to work for the day. When I came back, my car was fully charged. And those you'll find at train stations, supermarkets, cinemas, those kind of places where you're going to leave the car for a few hours and you're not expected to run back to it. It is first come, first serve, but there's normally a bunch of chargers, 5, 10. I've been to places where there's been 15, 20 chargers, and you just rock up and plug in. Where there's one rapid charger and you're going to be, and it's going to charge your car in half an hour, you really need to come back and take your car away, and don't just leave your car plugged in there, because people can get very irate.
But there are queues sometimes then.
I've been to places where there have been queues, but what I tend to do is I tend to arrive at any charger with enough juice to get to at least the next charger or even the charger after it. And if there's a queue there, I'll go to the next one. So it depends. Once you start to learn how to drive the cars, it'll be different for different people.
I tend to use rapid chargers where there's more than one, like Instavolt have always been in pairs, and now the latest installations all seem to be coming in pairs at least or more.
And even the ecotricity ones, they're doubling their charge capacity. This by May, every unit of ecotricity, which are the chargers that are on the motorways, each single unit will now be able to charge 2 cars, so they'll instantly double the ability at every single service station.
With their partnership with the GridServe, GridServe already started changing the ecotricity chargers for brand new ones.
They'll be done by June, they say.
Another interesting thing on charging, which might be of interest to people thinking about taking holidays, a number of the holiday booking companies, so like booking.com, if you want to book a cottage somewhere, you can put a filter on and say, I want a place that's got an EV charger, and you can go and book a cottage in Wales, and you know it's got a plug that you can use and plug in, and you can go on holiday, rock up, unpack all your stuff, plug the car in, and the next morning your car's fully charged, your trip around Wales or Scotland or wherever you want to go. I think that's quite an attractive way of doing it as well. And I think from the holidays I've taken before lockdown, the owners were seeing that as being a very positive thing. They were getting a lot of EV owners turning up because they could see that there was a charging point, and they were explicitly picking those properties because it gave them something to make their holidays easier.
Yeah, definitely.
We've actually always booked in somewhere with a charger.
It's nearly 9 o'clock, so I'm going to call a halt. However much everybody's enjoying rabbiting on about their electric cars.
Thank you, everyone.
No, well, thank you all for coming. That was great.
Thank you for arranging it.
Sorry, not everybody had a chance to, but it's always like that. But it's much better when we get to the physical one, because then you can chat away.
Absolutely.
Your heart's content on your specific question about the particular car you want to talk about or the issues you want to talk about. But anyway, hopefully you'll all join us for a real event. Yeah.
Certainly.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, Julia. Thanks, Tim.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.